Today we're at the Smizer Stadium, the home of St Mirren Football Club, a club very much on the up under manager Stephen Robinson, but behind the scenes, Vice Chairman Jim Gillespie is the man pulling the strings, and we're delighted to say, Bill, he's joining us in today's edition of Coffee Club.
I'm really looking forward to this. He's a fascinating guy through his work in charity and business with the Kibble and the community in Paisley, now Paisley's biggest employer. But in the last 5 years he's been a really important figure as St Mirren have grown towards these 3 seasons of finishing top 6 in a row and getting to Europe earlier on this season. His relationship with Stephen Robinson and Jim Goodwin before that's been a very important part of this, and I think he's going to be a great guy to chat with.
It's a rare interview. He's not done many of these in the past, and we're very much looking forward to today in today's Coffee Club. Jim Gillespie, it's fantastic to see you today. Thanks very much for inviting us out to St Mirren's Smizer Stadium. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Brilliant, it's a pleasure to have you both.
Well, we've been speaking, Bill, since we started to do these conversations with some guests that we wanted Jim to come on.
Yes.
It's fantastic that he's here.
And at a great time for St Mirren Football Club. Having just got into the top 6. We're just heading into the last 5 games. It's an exciting time for the club.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, couldn't be more delighted with the team this season. Getting that top 6 is, people think that, oh, you've achieved that, but we've still got 5 games to go, and we're very much determined to win those 5 games and see where that takes us.
Can we take you back, Jim, to the start when you first came in here? I think it's been almost 5 years. You came in 2020. The world was in a very different place back then.
Yeah.
What happened? How did it come about? You were involved with the Kibble, obviously you still are.
Yeah.
An association there, but you decided to come into the club. Tell us about that.
It's quite interesting. First of all, I'm not sure you could ever say buying a football club or investing in a football club in February 2020 gave me a bit of insight. I was like, scanning ahead in a business sense, I'm not sure I predicted that. But what happened was my son plays football, Lewis. He was involved in St Mirren Academy. Lewis, there's a couple of opportunities for Lewis, but St Mirren, the way the guys went about it at St Mirren, the way they spoke to him, attracted him. Alan McManus and young Craig McLeish at the academy appealed to me. It was something about the club you think, kind of value-led business. Then I was at the academy, and then one of the games, Tony Fitzpatrick slid up to me.
Oh, there you go. That explains it all. Tony Fitzpatrick got his claws into you.
And I think Tony had identified that I was the chief exec of Kibble. As you know, Kibble's a big organisation in Paisley area, Renfrew area, and Tony had ideas of sponsorship. Tony's always working the angle to the benefits of money. So he came up to me, introduced himself, we had a chat about sponsorship and how we could get involved, and it led to a conversation with Tony and then a conversation with the then majority owner Gordon Scott, and we just spoke around about how Kibble could get involved and what Kibble does. And Tony had a real passion. He's a real good heart, Tony.
Yeah. That's a great way of putting it. He has a very, very good heart, doesn't he?
A real good heart, and he had a real affinity with working with kids, and he had a history of working with kids. And Tony always kind of, even back to his playing days, he had a kind of link with Kibble where St Mirren used to train in the Kibble pitches. Right. So Tony was kind of driving how could we involve the kids and what could St Mirren offer the kids. And it went from that, what could Kibble offer St Mirren and what could St Mirren offer the young people at Kibble, and just grew to the point where we thought, do you know what, we could come in. The club was in that transition where Smizer, the fan group, were looking to buy that 51% stake. I think at that point it was now 7 years, so they'd done a plan with Gordon 3 years prior. 10 years time the club would be majority fan owned, and we worked with Smizer, some really good men there, Kenny Dockery and Alan Quinn. They led the conversations in the Smizer part, and we thought about how we could get that position where Kibble could come in. And we looked at the German model. It was really interesting, where they have 51% fan owned, and then they have a large corporate organisation that helps provide the kind of support services and business processes to the business. And that was almost like the position that we found Kibble in, where we would invest in 27.5% stake in the club. We would allow fan ownership to take place 2 years from 2020, and they would be getting fan ownership at half the money and half the time was the strapline, and then we would come in and support the club with kind of support services and kind of business processes around it. And for us, which was really important as well, because Kibble to gain out of that, was that our young people, we knew that young people go into hospitality and leisure, and what a better environment. It's a kind of special place, football, and you see it can engages all people from all different walks of life, and that was really important for us. So our young people, we've got 20-25 young people a week that come through between here and Ralston, the training ground, where they're working in ground maintenance or general constructions, joinery, paintwork. They'll work in the kitchens, they'll work in hospitality, they'll work in the front of house, they'll support with the ticket office. So real pipeline opportunities for our young people to go and get into employment, which is crucial for what we're trying to achieve.
But back at that point, Jim, as you say, with COVID, lockdown, everything that was going on at that time, there must have been people telling you, listen, this isn't the time to get involved in football.
Well, it's funny, right? Because, well, absolutely, but it's those hindsight, the if, the people that say only if, and you're like, well, maybe a month ago. So we'd been working the deal in 2019 from about the summer, right. And we kind of got everything in process. And the deal was almost done in January 2020. That was kind of when it was announced, the end of January. And then in the February, what Smiles had done was put it to their members to kind of change of ownership and change a model. And it was voted through unanimously. I think it was 94% of the fans voted it through. And that took place in February 2020. And then March 2023, 23rd of March 2020, bang, we were in lockdown. So, but listen, it's like we're a big organisation, Kibble, and we're open 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and have been for over 170 years. So we very much just embrace St Mirren as part of that.
For people that don't know, we talk about the Kibble. Just briefly tell anybody that's not from the Paisley area, doesn't know what it's about.
So we look after the most vulnerable young people in Scotland, sometimes further afield, but primary care is for young people in Scotland, and we have a host of services that we look after, from residential care, community care, secure care, foster care, and we run education services right across that, from the age of 5 to 25, where your young workforce development, which was primarily the reason for St Mirren, where we get young people into employment, which is absolutely important for that hope in life, to get them into kind of skills for work and readiness. So we offer that. We work right across the 32 local authorities in Scotland, and unfortunately, may I say, we have a kind of strapline in Kibble is to exist, not to exist, which people, including the bank, find mad, where they say you exist, not to exist, but you're...
So you mean you'd rather you didn't have to be doing it?
Listen, and if the world was at a better place, or society was a better place, there'd be no need for places like Kibble, but unfortunately, due to the current position that the world's in, that our services are in more in demand. So
it's amazing though, the way the place is growing, because when I was growing up, everybody grew up in Paisley. If you misbehaved, your mum would say, you'll go to the Kibble. Right. And it was just seen as the bad boys' school, but now it's such a massive, whole sort of community-led operation. It's huge, isn't it?
Oh, it's great, and you touched on one of my bugbears there. I don't live in or come from the Paisley area, and the word of the Kibble, it's always, I hear that, I think it's this bad boy place, but it's not. It's a place where we do amazing work with young people. And listen, I've got to say, the young people that we work with are amazing. Just the resilience that they have, and the care that they have, and the opportunities that I think that they offer other people and offer life's great. So listen, it's about offering support at the right time to young people for them to go and really make a difference in their life and a difference in impact in community. So
when you come into St Mirren February 2020, what does the club look like at that point? When you first came in with your business head, what did you have in your mind that you wanted to change right away? I
just wanted to slide in.
Slide in?
I just come in and get settled and get to know how...
No big plans at that point?
No, you're ambitious. I'm one of these ambitious people. My mother used to say to me, Jim, you need to let your head rest, because I was always thinking of what's next. And I wanted to bring that to St Mirren, and how could we... Tony had a great attitude. He top six, Jim, we're an absolute top six. And I used to say to Tony, but top six, achieving top six is great, but how do we become a top six club? And I think there's a slight difference, because you can go and get top six once, and you can maybe wait 3 or 4 years, or I think we were 38 years before we done it. But how do we become a top six team? So we need to, how do we achieve that?
Do you know, Tony took so much stick from a lot of people when he came out, when St Mirren came back to the Premiership, and he said St Mirren can finish top six, and it was actually totally sharp. But then he had 3 years in a row under Stephen Robinson. He wasn't just saying things off the top of his head, was he? He truly believed it.
No, because if he touching on both points here, is when I looked at the club and looked at it as a business, and you look at the stadium, it's new, it's training ground. Many clubs have got a training ground. The basics, the foundations were there. And I spent a bit of time with Brian McCausland and George Campbell, just getting a wee bit about the history of the club, and those guys should take tremendous credit in the position that the club's in. So for me, you look at it and then you start to think, and I go back to, I was only, I don't know, a young boy, less than 10, when St Mirren won the Scottish Cup, Ian Ferguson's goal. I always remember the next day seeing the bus go through Paisley and the amount of fans. Ian Ferguson scores, he runs to the goals at Hampden, and you think, this is untapped potential. So what Tony's saying is right, but what we need to have is a strategy. We need to have deliverables. How do we, it's okay wishing for that, but how do we go and achieve that? And I think that was what, for me, when you brought me the board and we developed strategy days and we brought in external consultants and we talked about what's their vision, what's your purpose, what's the values of the club, how do we drive that? And I think when you see now, and I know we'll probably touch on it, but you go back to some of the players that moved on, those values in the club, those drive in the club, those expectations were part of that decision making that was formed in mid-2020, 21 when COVID was here, because we really worked on the mindset and the vision of the club in the boardroom at that time.
Yeah, because that's the thing, I mean, everyone has always talked about the untapped potential at St Mirren. You mentioned that cup final in '87, where Ian Ferguson ran. I was behind the goals that day, the next day in Paisley. We were there, you know, a lot of fans were there. There's always been untapped potential. How do you turn that in from potential to reality? Because the team has done it in the last 3 seasons.
But that's where people say football's a unique business, and it is. But if you get into a different sector in life, that you need to understand and learn that sector. But there's strong business principles that you should take when you're scaling and developing businesses, and those are what we've done, and that's about the old saying, sweating your assets. Every person that's employed by someone, every fan that comes to a game, every volunteer, they're all striving for the best for the club, and if everybody performs to their maximum, then they kind of, the sum of the whole is greater, and you gather that momentum, and that's been a real thing, gathering that momentum. But being clear, what does it take, and taking calculated business risks. So how we flip budgets in a sense, where an example would be you look at the playing budget and you say, right, we're going to spend this amount and we're going to have ourselves placed at 10th in the league, and in the Christmas we'll have a wee pocket. If we need be, we'll go and spend more. And one of the things I challenged myself on was, because I was involved more in the football, was looking back and saying, well, how much do we spend at Christmas? And if you go back to the season that we beat Dundee United in the playoff, there was a massive investment in the January window. And you start to think, well, over the season, what's our playing budget? And you start to look back and average that out, and you think, well, take a risk, a slight risk, but have an opportunity in it and say, right, well, if we spend more in the summer and bank more points pre-Christmas,
you don't have to take that risk.
You don't have to take it, and then you're looking up the way rather than looking down the way. And it's just that kind of thinking that through and change your mindset and how you develop that.
That's interesting, because Dundee United have done that this season, and they've got Jim Goodwin, who was here when you came here. And how was your relationship with him?
I had a really good relationship with Jim. I found Jim an honest man. You know, he's great to deal with. I remember extending his contract, and I was just maybe 6 months in and thought to Jim, have a chat about your contract. And he came to my house and we sat down and he done it over a cup of coffee. I always think you can judge people in business. You know, I've always been brought up kind of family stuff and kind of people. You judge people and you can how you can work with people. And as a chief exec in my real life and work, that people bit, working out who you trust, who you don't trust, and judgment in a negotiation is really important. And that Jim just came across a man of integrity. He had a real passion for St Mirren, but a very bright man.
Yeah, he was under a bit of pressure when just about the time you came in, wasn't he?
Yeah. So I'd come in the February and he had a bit of a dry spell, a few games where he was under a bit of pressure for the fans, and again, Lewis was playing at the academy, and Jim asked for a chat, and I had a chat with him, and we spoke about football, and we spoke about risk taking, and we spoke about how we could change things, and he went on a good run. You know, he kind of really opened up. We went to Aberdeen and we were 1-0 up, and I think they scored an equaliser late on, and then from there we just grew and grew and grew. But I always knew Jim had the ability to go further in football. I still think he has. I think he obviously had that situation at Aberdeen, and I know some of the factors in there. Maybe he's been harshly judged at times, but I think you see him now. He's a very good leader. He knows his football, and I'm sure that Jim's career will kick on.
You mentioned relationships, because one of the things when we speak to Stephen Robinson, he kind of mentions you quite a lot in the sense of the relationship you've got with him.
Yeah.
How important is that, Jim, as you touched on there, to have that kind of understanding between each other what your jobs are and kind of having that relationship that it works?
I think in football, you've got to have trust. It's really important that whoever's leading the football team for the board, in a sense, and the manager, can have that trust. And it's not a thing that you get overnight. With managers, you have to work on it. I mean, my first impressions with managers are quite cynical. You know, like they live in Stephen will say to me sometimes, or he used to say to me, 5 games, Jim, 5 game cycle. 5 games, if I get beat, I'm getting the sack. 5 games, I'm getting the Real Madrid job. Yeah, I need to. So it was like they're independent, and what you need to build is that level of, I'm here to support you. You know, you here at the club to make a success. We believe in those skills and attributes, and when you see the guy, I think he's top class.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's top class, but the relationship that I have him is based on that he knows that I'm there to support him and give him what he can. But to be honest, he gives me a lot back. He'll help me in the game. He'll talk to me through certain things. He'll open up to me, which is a kind of, when you're a leader, you need that. You need to kind of have the relationship where he'll open up and you remove that area where you've gained that trust.
Yeah.
Then you can really work together.
That's a really interesting point, because when we deal with Stephen, he's not a man for opening up, doesn't open up to the media, doesn't seem to want to open up too much to people he doesn't know. So that says a lot for your relationship with him, that he's coming to you and he's being a different kind of, you're seeing a different side to him.
Yeah, listen, you have some conversations that are difficult at times, but at the end of the day, he knows that, I know that he's got the best interests of St Mirren, and he knows that I've got the best interests of St Mirren, and I want him to be a success. I mean, I've never shied away from him when Jim was here. The whole position for me as a manager at St Mirren is that they want and they've got an ambition to go at a higher level, and if I personally or the club can help them in that, then why not? Because if you look at where we've been, we were, I think, in the year after COVID, with the Hearts game, obviously, it was a great result. So we came from the relegation playoff, then we came the Hearts game, then we got pipped at Douglas Park, which was probably still my lowest point in my football life.
Yeah, to make the top 6.
I would just give that goal, Bruce Anderson's goal with the last kick, that was and that, so we were 7th that season. Then Stephen came in, we were 8th or 9th, and then we've had a 6th, a 5th, and we're 6th at the moment, at minimum 6. So the trajectory of clubs went up. But I think it's around about how do you help support them get that, and there are always going to be blips. You know, when Stephen first came in, there was that run that wasn't great, and there was every season there's been 2 or 3 dips that aren't great. But you've got to be strong to them as well and stand by them and trust them. Do you
have arguments, though, Jim? Is there harsh conversations you have with people? You that kind of guy or not?
If I need to be, but usually Stephen's self-critical. He sometimes the conversation with Stephen is don't be as hard.
Right.
But at times we'll have conversations. I mean, at times the budget is always, football and budgets are always touchy, and at times we'll need to say, listen, I think we are where we are, and other times he'll be surprised when I'll say I think we should go for the higher paid player because I think he offers more value. So he knows that if we can stretch things, that I'll always support him. But he also knows that there'll be a line in the sand that enough's enough.
I mean, obviously, we're talking about how things are going so well, but it's not come without its challenges. Even the start of this season, you're talking about the players that you kind of pushed the ball out maybe a little bit for. 3 of those that came in the summer, you were very quickly kind of opening the door to and showing the other way. How challenging was that? I'm talking about Jacob Brown, Sean Rooney and Kevin Van Veen. They would come in as big players, and obviously off the field stuff dictated that they had to move on. How challenging was that?
It's challenging. Personally, it's challenging because you're heavily involved in that recruitment process, and you bring those guys in, and you have big hopes and beliefs that when you look at you review your season before, and you think we could need this type of player and this type of character. Even sometimes you recruit the character.
Staff goal.
And that, there we
Victoria
go.
Gills in to reception, please. Victoria Gills in to reception.
So, hurry up, Victoria.
We've got the tannoid working. That's always a good sign. So I think that was personally challenging, but I've got experience in these type of things. And if I go back to, I spoke about resilience in our business, and one of the things that we needed to create in St Mirren was resilience. And I think that demonstrated the club has that resilience to come through that. Now, one of the things that's difficult is that they're young guys, and I'm not here to say that were they guilty, they're not guilty, was it a mistake, I don't. I'm not here to judge, but what was clear was there were certain behaviours and things that didn't meet the values of St Mirren, and as a board we were very much of the view that let's treat their employees of the club, let's treat them right, let's follow due diligence with HR processes and legal situations, but they'd very much trained and played their last game with the club, and we had to move them on because we're a value-driven club, a value-driven organisation, and therefore the outcome was that those players moved on to new pastures.
And that's the thing as well, with your background in the Kibble and the work you do there, you've dealt with far higher tariff issues than that.
Yeah.
But you obviously bring those values of right and wrong
Yeah.
with you to this, don't you?
Yeah, well, there's that right and wrong, but you've got a responsibility to the community. You've got a responsibility to the values of the club. But when we're recruiting players, we're looking into some of those things. Unfortunately, we didn't see those things permeating into the position that they did. But I think there's also standards in the dressing room, or standards in the club that you're setting. And overall, when you get through that, it leads you in a better place. We're in a better place as a club, having came through that. And I think maybe 2020, would we have responded and came through that the same way? But the board are aligned. And I think when you get a board aligned through the core of the business, then you start to create a culture. And business culture's crucial. And people say, how do you create that culture? Well, culture to me is like stories. So you have to tell the story, because you have to demonstrate the story, because if you tell we're going to have this community engagement club and we'll be a top 6 club and we'll have this, but you need to tell the story and live up to that. And once you live up to that, people start to believe it, and I think that's another story. That St Mirren don't just say we're this community club, we have these standards, we have those expectations. Well, we hold ourselves accountable to that and we deliver on that. And then when you get into the dressing room, you talk to the players, they understand that in future, this is a line. So you're creating that protection for the club, and that's what I mean about resilience. And when you do that, you also need to drive through that ambition. And I think we can touch on lots of that, but ambition is really important. And we think about those things as well.
Did you take all of that away from Stephen?
Yeah.
And you still?
Well, myself and the board.
You as a board.
But it was me, Stephen, your job is to keep the dressing room, keep the momentum, focus on Saturday, focus on training, and let us manage the rest.
One of the other big things this season, or even I think it was last season, it was a decision when Rangers and Celtic come to the Smizer Stadium to give them one stand rather than 2 or maybe 3.
Yeah.
And that's something I think Rangers and Celtic fans, if you go onto social media, are outraged by. But St Mirren fans think it's fantastic, and it's I think been shown by the attendances, tell me if I'm wrong, that are up in other games in the back of it.
40-50%, yeah.
Can you talk us through that decision making? Because some people will say you've still got empty seats, but at the same time, for me, we've spoken about this before, your own fans think it's the right thing. Talk us through that, Jim.
I mean, the Old Firm catches the headlines, but in a sense our attitude was how do we grow our fan base, how do we continue that community engagement, fan engagement. So it was a roundabout saying, and there was always some issues around St Mirren fans not enjoying Old Firm matches when
always been a story. It's always been a thing.
And there was a rhetoric from previous positions that says, well, we gain this amount of income, so here's how we justify it. And when you start to see the club progressing in the league and manoeuvring in different ways, and people start to get behind that ambition and momentum, and one of those was, we'll take the Old Firm out it, but how do we just manage to increase our home attendances and take advantage of our home ground? And that was a decision. That was primarily the decision. It was about, well, if we have another 300-400 season ticket books, that then accommodates the loss of income if you're taking away now the Tony Fitzpatrick stand. So that was primarily, the Old Firm catches the headlines, but it was primarily about how do we engage more with our support, how do we listen to what the supporters are saying, but how do we say to the supporters, well, you need to support us. We're willing to take these decisions, and they're quite hard decisions, because if there's a pot of money there that's quite easy to obtain, and there's maybe a more difficult way to get that, but if it's the right thing, then back to that culture, the fans see the club progressing and making the right decisions.
That's the thing, Jim. Other clubs have tried the same thing, St Johnstone, Kelly, but a lot of times they get back to what it was before. You know, was it difficult to kind of...
Well, you've got to have belief in your convictions, and come back to the point about 1987 Cup final and what's the potential of this club. And now we're having discussions around the board to say, well, if away fans are not going to take the full allocation, what areas, we've done it for the Valur game, what areas of the away stand can we sell to your fans.
So that we might even get smaller, their allocation.
Yeah, because people always say, when do you increase the capacity of the stadium? Well, you stage it, don't you? You incrementally growth, and you get to a point where you say, right, well, we now need to think about that. But what we're doing now is we're pretty much filling the stadium. When you get a good away crowd, we're pretty much filling the stadium. So in the days that we're not getting that, or the away team don't take the allocation, can we work with the council and other regulatory bodies to create a third or whatever we need to sell your fans? So that's just building on the removing the away end.
Again, there's a big trust thing there as well, that you have to trust the fans and they now trust you more, that you've delivered on your promise. That's a big thing, isn't it?
Absolutely, and that's when you go back and you can stand up, and I remember standing in the Glen Hill and saying that we'll look at every area of the organisation. That's what we've done. And change creates difficulties, and some people don't necessarily like the change.
Absolutely.
But where we are 5 years on, I think people understand it, whether they like it or they don't. They understand the change, and I think the club's in lots of good people in the club, the board. Guys like Alec White that was here on the board for 3 or 4 years, been really great guy, worked high level on the railway. John Needham, good guy, high in RBS, really talented board, and how we've pushed the club forward as a unit, as a team. I don't think there's anybody that can say it's me that's done this. I think we work as a team in the board, and we're really trying to align ourselves to the strategy of the operational staff.
At the same time, though, your own reputation within the game is high. Number of months ago, I think August last year, I did a story saying that Rangers were interested in you as their chief executive. I believe they spoke to you at the time, but you made a decision to stay here. Can you talk us through your thought process going through that period?
Yeah, listen, I've always respected anyone that comes and asks for a conversation or a cup of coffee with you. And I've had conversations with other teams since Rangers, but Rangers are a massive institution. Great organisation, but ultimately you have those conversations, and I've got an amazing job at Kibble. I need to say that. You know, it's whilst it's rewarding. It's rewarding in more than just financial terms. You know, to make a difference to the kids that I work with on a daily basis, or the staff that I lead on a daily basis, is something special. And obviously, I'm now firmly embedded in St Mirren. Whether it's Rangers or there's other clubs, you've got to listen, but for the foreseeable future at the moment, my commitment's firmly Kibble and St Mirren.
At the same time, it must have been tempting, it must have been to have that conversation, to have that approach and to be spoken to about the job. It must have been something you had to think seriously, long and hard about.
I think about all these opportunities. You've got a different, you offer jobs down south and you think, wow, look at the package, but I've got 2 kids and I think I don't want to stay away from home from them, so you don't take that opportunity. So you just got to weigh these things up. But listen, I think having probably had some strong business experiences in the past and then understanding football, I think it lends you to have people interested to have a chat, and I think it's always good.
Because it's such a, I mean, there's an emotional pull when it, you know, to anybody gets offered a new job, you get your ego goes up a bit. And then when it's football, there might be a different kind of emotional pull. But I take it in the end, you're business head, and you know, would take over from any emotion and that kind of thing.
It's in any, whether it's a football opportunity or a business opportunity, it's got to be right for me and my family. And as I say, I'm really ambitious, and I still see like huge opportunities in Kibble, huge opportunities in St Mirren, and that satisfies me at the moment. And that's, you've got to, as you say, Bill, you've got to balance that out. And as I say, with 2 kids, my daughter's 21, they're getting even loose. They're primary to my considerations at all times.
So no regrets?
I'm happy where I am, delighted. But listen, you broke that story, which was great. I ended up in, where was it? At home under the bed for a couple of days because I couldn't leave. But, that's fine. But I still got to know you because of that. That's always been. That was the first time we met.
You phoned me the next day asking about the story.
Well,
anyway,
he sent me a message saying, "Do you know I've written this story? I don't know who he's going to be." I said, "He'll be absolutely fine. Just get in touch with him." And
anyway,
and you were fine.
Of course, it's listen. It's all party.
But it doesn't touch on what we're talking about. It touches on because
Yeah.
of the good job you're doing. Not just Rangers, but what you're talking about. There's been other serious approaches as well that English football Again, it must be another attraction for you. Do you see that at some point in the future, Jim? Or?
Potentially. Listen, you don't close the door on opportunities. And I say, I worked with my previous chief exec. He always said to me, always be polite and courteous and listen, Jim. And I've always taken that on board. And you don't know. You just don't know. You've got, as I say, you have a real commitment to the jobs that I'm in. Kibble's more than a job to me. So that's like a kind of. It means that the values of that organisation are so aligned to mine that every day you get up and know that there's something worthwhile and exciting.
Can I take you back? You touched on it at the start there about your mum joking with you, kind of give your head a rest when you were young. What were you like? Were you did you have those kind of entrepreneur kind of mindset as a young man?
Yeah, I remember doing my MBA when I was kind of early 30s. And it was almost like people say MBAs are an absolute waste of time. But for me, whether I gained lots out of it, but what it done was kind of reaffirmed things that I had done. So I think there was almost like a kind of intrinsic, natural entrepreneurial spirit in me. And it was always like, oh, if you've done this or done that. And you could try, my mum would always say, Jim, what, it's Sunday afternoon, what are you playing at? And I say, I was brought up, my dad had his own business. And I was always brought up with him, and it was always like individual negotiations and deals. So you learn the kind of psychology.
So what was your dad's business?
He was a timber merchant.
So were you in the background listening to the conversations about?
I was a wee boy, and it was funny because at that time in the world it was all cash. You know, it was you didn't have like so. We used to go, and he would say to me, if we go for the shop or the petrol station or to diesel up in the lorry, he would say to me, right, Jim, you need to look at the floor. Make sure I don't drop any money when I'm in here. It's just that type of world. It's not came from Airdrie, a wee town outside Airdrie. So people skills have been primary for me, you know. And I think I look back now and think, that's a strength. I'm no specialist in like education or social work or law or accountancy, but I've always been someone that could work well with people. And I think as a business person, you've got to be able to have those negotiation skills and judge it. And my dad would always have a great saying. My dad was never in a betting shop in his life. Just doesn't believe in it. And he would talk about that, maybe the Grand National work, that betting and footballs, and he would never ever entertain it. And he used to always say to me, Jim, you only ever bet on your own capabilities.
Wow.
And it's always stood by me.
That's brilliant. So your mum would say to you, let your head rest. You've got this massive job at Kibble. You've decided to take this on here, and you've also got totally immersed in St Mirren as well. When and how, or do you let your head rest ever?
I don't.
Okay. I
don't, and I enjoy it. I think when I say the words, I don't because it's quite careless, but when you're flying by the seat of your pants in business, you're performing. Yeah. And your business is growing, and you've got that momentum, and you're developing. And Stephen Robinson, I think, is a bit of kindred spirit to me, because like if I'm not hitting him with an idea, he's hitting me with an idea, because I don't think he sleeps either. So when you've got that in Kibble, she says massive growth and diversity, and I think we're trying to achieve that in St Mirren, but that's just something that won't. It's just me.
So do you not have an outlet, like a relaxation outlet or a?
My kids. Yes. I see Lewis is in the academy at St Mirren, and spending time with my daughter. And I took up golf. I hadn't played golf for 10 years. I hadn't played around 18 holes for 10 years, and I played about 18 months ago, and I thought, do you know what? Put the phone away, and that's a bit of an out for me. Maybe the gym, go to the gym or go for a game of golf, but I've never been for a game of golf since December, so the last 6 months have been a bit manic with just plans for the future.
So about Lewis in the academy then, what kind of football dad are you, standing on the side of the academy?
You just leave him to it. Listen, football's great, and I loved football, and Lewis loves football, but if Lewis wants to play tennis tomorrow, we'll go and play tennis. He's 14. If he wants to play golf, we'll play and gay golf, but he's football mad. But I don't buy into this, live your dreams through your son.
No, absolutely.
I want to be part of his dreams.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whether it's football or it's working with me in the future or it's going to uni and having his own career, then that's important.
So in terms of what's next then for St Mirren, we're sitting here at the stadium, it's looking fantastic out there as usual. Is there plans here that for the next few years that you can tell us about? What's next in terms of how you want to take things forward?
Well, we've got the football that we want. We want another top 6 finish. We want Europe. I don't shy for that. We'll support Stephen in every aspect to develop. We're already thinking about how we put a kind of an area, the Ralston, that's going to be for recovery area for the players. So we're developing that. We'll continue developing the pitches at Ralston and the pitches here. We're looking at how we can stretch our recruitment in the academy, pushing that forward. Some great staff in the academy, top class staff in the academy. But really, what we really want to do is think about, we took over at 3.5, 4 million, or we got involved in St Mirren at 3.5, 4 million. We're now 6 and a bit.
Just turnover.
Yeah. Let's strive for 7. Let's strive for 8. And that's going to be more commercial stuff. There's absolutely a player trade model in there. And go back to the man that scored the 87 Cup final, I think in 1988, he's still the highest transfer fee for St Mirren at 750,000. We want to break that. We want to get that. We've got certainly players in the academy that could, but we need more commercial stuff. We need to develop
that's been something that's kind of maybe it's let St Mirren down the years. They've brought young players through, but maybe not cashed in the way they should have done. We've got guys in the Scotland team, John McGinn, Kenny McLean, who came through the academy here.
Yeah.
Yet St Mirren didn't make the money that Hibs did, and is that something that the club has to improve on?
Well, we've definitely got a player trade model now. Like we'll turn over a reasonable amounts of money every year, whether it's players, first team players, or academy players that are transitioning down south. So we've definitely got a player trading model there. And I don't think that clubs, I think just recently in the last week, clubs don't treat us with that kind of, we can go into someone and offer a cheap.
Yeah.
I was going to bring up.
So I think we've got beyond that reputation, which was crucial. And I think you'll get players like Evan Mooney and Callum Penman, and there's some other ones further down that I think have got, they're ones that I think have got real potential.
You touched on it there, Toyosi Olasanya, a couple of weeks ago. He got a contract in 5 games, and yet the club, it seems, have managed to make a bit of him. He's away to the MLS. And Houston, in the face of it, it seems like great business.
Yeah, it was a great business, but I'll go back to that bit where you grow up in an area where you have to understand the deal, understand who you're negotiating with, and I think the American side were clearly keen to get Olasanya in. I think they knew that if they hadn't got him in at this window, he more likely would have went somewhere else in the summer, and therefore we had to use that as leverage to say, well, unless we're getting what we're looking for, then the deal's not happening, and we managed to get a compromise position that we are fairly happy with.
But that is the kind of thing that St Mirren hasn't done enough of down the years. And I mean, I know you talk about it's not one person, but how much in a thing like that is down to your savvy with business?
I think you've got to take all in any walk of life and in any situation, whether it's COVID or whether it's the 3 guys, you've got to pull your resources together, and you never come across an experience that's the same as the one before. So you've got to be agile in that. So I think I'll lead on this in a sense, but don't get me wrong, I get support from Stephen and others to help get that through and manoeuvre that. But you've got to have that open mindset and work out your opponent. Well,
the way you're talking there, Jim, it strikes me you enjoy these negotiations.
I love it. I love it. I love a deal. I think I've got a kind of simple model in my head in life. At Kibble, I've got 5 things in the morning. My directors will be buckled when they see this, because I say 5 things in the morning, I go in for my shower, and if any of those 5 things are on the right, we need to impact it. And only we can impact it. And then St Mirren's the same. But when it comes to negotiating a deal, like I love when you get that business, see that rub of the business, and you're in the nitty-gritty, and you can get a win.
So what are the 5 things?
I can't tell you those
Come
5
on.
things.
Is it the same 5 things all the time?
No, different.
No, different 5 things.
No, there's bits about people, there's bits about culture, but Kibble will have different dynamics. But St Mirren, so I think about those things. So it's about where are we with the budget, where are we with the football, can we stretch things, can we make things different? But if any of those things are out of kilter, then you need to fix it. And that's where if you don't fix it, that leads into problems further down the line.
Yeah. Well, you join us in this special edition of Coffee Club, myself, Robert Grieve, Bill Leckie and Jim Gillespie, the Vice Chairman at St Mirren. It's been fascinating so far. I was going to ask you, Jim, as well, there's been talk recently about league reconstruction. I know it's been shelved a little bit, it seems, in the last couple of weeks. What's your thoughts on that? Because it's something that seems to rear its head every couple of years. It's been a while, right enough, since it was last spoken about. But from your point of view, from St Mirren's point of view, where do you sit in terms of what could happen next?
We're pretty open for what opportunities lie ahead. But I use the word opportunities. They've got to be opportunities collectively across Scotland. I think sometimes you get competition and people start thinking in silos, and those silos can impact the bigger opportunity. And I think there's an opportunity for Scottish football to think, really think about how collectively they can grow the industry. And I think league reconstruction could be one of those. Dispersing of finances could be another. Solidarity money could be those things. So really thinking about how do we develop a product nationally that can grow for the benefit of all. And I don't mean that everybody can get the same amount. No. But there's got to be some form of acknowledgement of different tiers in football. But if you go back to the statistic where I think I read Celtic have won 80% of all trophies in the last 10 years. Yeah. And if you look at what the rewards financially are towards that success, that gulf just gets bigger. And we've got to try and think outside the box how we could get everybody a bit more and then therefore raise the standards.
What do you think of the product just now, overall?
I think there's more fans now engaging in Scottish football, which is great. I still think sometimes when I watch games I go, are we really setting up the game right? To be honest, I think we develop different players in different ways. We change managers. And listen, I could
Five games.
Stephen could move and I could be off. But I think there's a real correlation between managers' length of stay and success at clubs. Clearly, because if he's here, he's doing a good job, or they're there. But I think it's about how you can recruit managers, how you recruit players, how you recruit staff, how you develop. So I think there's a real opportunity. But I'm not sure we've got the buy-in collectively. Until we get that collective buy-in, then there's always going to be some resistance.
Well, that's the thing, when we're talking about league reconstruction, invariably it comes round to people kind of looking after themselves a lot of the time, if not all the time.
Yeah.
Have you found that in your conversations that you've got involved with other clubs, other chairmen, other chief execs, other vice chairman and chairman? How have you found that dynamic?
Yeah, well, I've had lots of conversations probably with everyone in Scottish football, and it can be that predicament at that moment. Clubs can be, I mean, this last season there was one or two clubs that had financial issues, so right there, they're talking about viability when some of us are looking at sustainability. Yeah. So therefore you've got that sort of a differential that can create difference of views, because you're looking at, and maybe St Mirren's view 5 years ago would be different to where it is. Yeah. But in life, I always believe you want to be the best in the best sector, or the strongest sector, rather than the best in the weak sector. And I think that if we can get people to try and think about that sort of position, let's get Scottish football as good as it can be, and then let's everybody strive for that position of being as good as they can be. We just raise the standards. I think that's something we need to have a kind of agreement on, kind of central mission.
That kind of sounds to me like, because there's one of the big arguments always, let's make the top league bigger, right? Do you feel that making the top league bigger, say a 16 for instance, or 14 or 16, could dilute quality even more, or would it bring us to where you want us to be?
No, I don't think it. I think if you look at some of those teams in the Championship at the moment, some real big hitters in there with big potential, and if you could, they could add stuff. But there's always that bit where, I mean, right now the 6 and 6 split does work. Yep. You know, you've got to see at the moment that there's a real interest in the Scottish game, and if you go too big, then you look at some of the English leagues, and it's pretty much there's that bottom bit and top bit. It's pretty done. The league's done 5 or 6 games, so you know you want to create that interest, and I think that does help with attendances, and it does help with the product. I think the sharing of resources might be something that could definitely raise standards. Yeah. And how do we get to that point? Because at times, listen, we at Kibble are a really big organisation in our sector, and I'll say to staff, we can get a bit insulated or just isolated and think about us, and listen, we'll just do what we can do because we can resource things and we can manoeuvre things. But there's a really big thing about sharing your DNA and trying to grow and develop other clubs around you as well.
But is there too much self-interest in Scottish football?
There's a wee bit of self-interest, absolutely. And I think that comes from even the fact that you have CEOs and you have people in committees and they discuss things, but the real decision makers discuss things.
The guys right at the very top?
I think that's a problem, potentially. The real people actually sit and make a decision, or how do we get those kind of people around the table to make a difference?
That's the thing. The guys at Neil Doncaster, the guys at SPFL will say they are representative of the clubs. Yeah. You see it differently from that? You think the executive need to be more?
I think we are representing the clubs, but what I mean is not so much, I mean the actual clubs themselves.
Yeah. Right.
You know, like we people could we pretty much, Keith's very open and Stephen's very open, sharing all the stuff in the committees, and we make a board view and we stick by it. And I think if we could have more contact with maybe other boards, then you would maybe have a different view of how we could share information or grow the industry or grow the sector.
Well, that would be a big exercise in trust, wouldn't it? Mm-hmm. With other boards, if other boards were able to open up to you about, you know, ways of doing things that would help the game rather than just helping themselves. That's a big trust.
Because these people are the people with the knowledge.
Yeah.
They know the knowledge of the game, and they know there's certain things that you would kind of almost say right off the table. We're not discussing that. Yeah. But how do we share best practice? How do we develop commercial activity? How do we work with a really good academy project? How do we? So there's got to be more sharing. I always think, back to my MBA, done a bit about intellectual property, and people were saying, in corporate business, you kind of grow that, you sell it, you make money from it. But I'm a great believer, and maybe it was the sector I'm involved in, that sometimes how you develop as a business is by sharing your DNA with the right-minded people and them sharing it with you, because that then means that there's growth, there's kind of natural growth that evolves from that.
In terms of the league reconstruction, it seems to be one of the deals been pushed, or one of the ideas been pushed as a 10 team. Bill's talking about a 14 or a 16. A non-starter?
I don't, St Mirren wouldn't sign up to a 10 team. I'll just say that the board's already discussed it. It's not something that would be reducing that when they attract us.
What's the thinking there? Why not?
Because I think you're almost like changing, you're reducing games, where I think maybe going to a 14 or a 16 might be better. Where you bring other clubs who could offer something to the league to it. People will say St Mirren's ambition is to stay in the league. It's no personal, it's no mine. My ambition is to hit that top 6, so it wouldn't change your position. We would grow from that, but would it maybe have more attraction to TV deals, to commercial activity, big teams that would come up here and take that away stand, there's no doubt about that, and bring a following and an atmosphere to the game. I remember growing up when you had like your Wraith Rovers and your Airdrie and your St Mirren's, your Partick Thistles, Falkirks, they were real. I mean, those were feisty games with big atmospheres, you know, and big attendances. So is there a role for that? Is there something that could help grow these organisations as well? So
it does feel from conversations I've had that what you're saying is maybe the consensus around a lot of Premiership clubs. Maybe, have you had conversations with other guys, other clubs who've said something similar?
Yeah, I wouldn't mention their names, but absolutely no.
Yeah.
There's a similar mindset that they want to see how we could develop and grow the game. Yeah. But I do understand other teams thinking that maybe less games would help them in other areas. Of course it could. But is there a way when you put minds together to achieve both? Yeah. Why not? Why not get the right people to do that?
Absolutely. Well, we're just about finished here for this week's, as I say, special edition of Coffee Club. As always, please like and subscribe. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. Bill's sorted the cakes this morning, unlike him. It does seem, Jim, speaking to you just finally, you seem to be loving life and your job at the Kibble. You work hard out there, obviously, and your job here at St Mirren. Is it fair to say you're embraced and fully immersed in it?
Oh, I love it. You know, it's a challenge, personal challenge, but it's what it does for Kibble. First of all, the young people that come to St Mirren, the benefits. I say we've got young people coming through the stadium and games, coming through the stadium during the week at the training ground, and real success. We've got some girls in the St Mirren ladies team. We've got kids doing an apprentice groundkeeping. That's so primarily the investment from Kibble's point of view is working well for us, and we're going to be more delighted with that. From a personal point of view, as I say, I really enjoy working with Stephen and the success we've had, and the board and the team around us. We're really all aligned, and long may that continue.
It's been a great chat, Bill, hasn't it?
Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Really enjoyed it. It's great being here as well, and in the home of football.
Yeah, it certainly is.
Yeah, well, thanks very much for joining us. Thanks for watching. As I say, let us know in the comment section below, and we'll catch you next week.